Hello and welcome to the Good Old Days, our Raynham program focusing on the history of the town of Raynham. I'm co-hosting, Pat Riley co-hosting with our host, Don McKinnon, at the other end of the room over there. Hello, Don.
Hello, Pat. How are you?
Good, thank you. And you've brought 3 guests today.
All in the family.
All in the family. I'd let you introduce our special guest today.
Well, we have Chief Lou, we have Juvenile Officer Lou, and we have Frank, the Rookie of the Year. How long, Frank, have you been on now? 5 weeks?
Almost a year now.
The time goes by when you're old.
And he really wants to get through probation, so no tough questions.
We don't know any questions, never mind tough. So Patricia, that's our family, and maybe Chief could start off and give us the historical end of the police and when his family became involved. Your dad was also involved.
My grandfather was a police officer, and my uncle was a police officer. That'd be my great uncle, which is Ricky Pacheco's father.
Oh, okay.
And then me, and these two are from the same generation. So they don't look it. This one looks like an older one, but
He's undercover, so if you see in your camera, just put your hand over his face, please, so he won't be recognizable.
This is, Lou's doing a charity event, so he's dressed up as a wrestler for this event. So, looks pretty good.
Just
too.
for this
we
event?
Got a picture. I'm sure his chief will straighten that out once he goes back to work.
Now, Chief Pacheco, you've spent your entire life in Raynham, grew up in Raynham, went to the Raynham schools and all of that, and then became a member of the Raynham Police Department.
Yes.
And spent your entire career there.
Yes.
Starting as a...
I did Raynham, Marine Corps during Vietnam, and then back to Raynham.
And how many years in the Raynham Police Department?
37 something.
Retired how many? How long ago now? Time flies.
January, a year and a half ago, a year and 9 months ago.
Okay. Was becoming a member of the police department always in your plans? Or?
No. At that time, the police department, being a police officer wasn't a real sought-after position during Vietnam. And people didn't want to change a green uniform for a blue one at the time. But I was glad I did, you know. I had people in my family said that it would fit in well with the military background and so on and so forth. So, and it worked out well for me.
Sometimes that happens, doesn't it? In other words, was people in your family suggesting you go into police work, as I'm sure you did?
Yes. Yes. They, at the time, you know, I had been working in construction, you know, during my breaks in the Marine Corps and so on and so forth. And then people in my family said you should take the exams for the police department. Didn't really want to at the time, but worked out wonderful. I had a great career. The town was always good to me. I had like every dream job you could have as a police officer, you know, from firearms instructor to canine officer for 8 years to, you know, I ran a drug task force for 5 years out of the district attorney's office. So I was personally very lucky and had a good career.
And you went through various steps from starting, was it as a part-time dispatcher, all the way up through chief?
That's true, yes. That's my little claim to fame. I don't know of anybody else that's worked every position in the police department. So part-time dispatcher, civilian dispatcher, special, patrolman, sergeant, lieutenant, captain, deputy chief, and chief in a civil service police department. A lot of people make it to chief, but they skip steps along the way. Some departments don't have all the steps. You know, they don't have deputy chiefs, or they don't have lieutenants or something like that.
Don, were you the selectman when Lou was appointed?
Yes, Lou came down the house, and that's the way to do it in those days, and introduced himself and said he was interested in police work, and it seemed practical at the time, and it sure seems practical now, because between him and Peter King, I think they, with all due respect to the prior, but let's go back to the prior a little bit, because they were well-meaning, hard-working police people. It isn't that they weren't capable. Times changed on them. M. Patrice father-in-law, I believe, was the first chief. Was he? He was part-time.
Right,
though.
yeah.
Right, because wasn't Chief Peter King was the first full-time, I believe?
No,
Chief,
no,
was he?
Rat
There was one
O'Brien.
before?
No, we had Reed.
Reed,
Okay.
Chief Reed. Yeah.
Was the first full-time, and then Rad. And so when Mr. McKinnon came in, he came in right at the change that he's talking about. He's been in fight. He started fighting, and 40 years later, he was still fighting when he got out.
I don't understand that, but it's true.
But I mean, he was the one that was instrumental in getting the Quinn bill for us. Getting, not because he wanted to. I don't think it was because he wanted to do anything special with police officers, but he believed that the education
Education
was
is very important.
was an important thing. And,
Which bothers
not to
me
minimize
when
what the other
governor
selectmen
disowned
did.
the Quinn
But he
bill.
was, like you said, he swore me in for 40 years. And Peter King was the best to work under. I mean, he was administrative, I was operational, and that allowed me to do all those things that we were talking about. And I was just with him in a meeting today. It was me, him, and Chief Donovan. We have our own table of Raynham chiefs. So.
See that?
But
The good old days table.
we, as Mr. McKinnon said, things changed quite a bit. I mean, we come on, there was 3 cruisers. The dispatch was run out of the chief's kitchen at night.
I can remember when the key was not available in the weekend.
Right.
If you pulled over Jack the Ripper on a Saturday, the Ripper was on his way.
Yeah, that's right, because he had no
you
place
couldn't
to
have
put
a
him.
key. Only the chief and the clerk had the key at that time.
So, and then we
Then
went
there was
through
in the back door of the police cruiser wasn't secure, so if he got injured, you'd take him to the hospital. As soon as you get there, he'd get out the back door and run away. So
there's no locks on the
no
doors.
locks on the doors. So it was really starting. It just shows that when you talk about the old days,
Right.
that was the humble beginning of police everywhere. It wasn't just Raynham.
And then the drugs blew up in the late 70s, early 80s. And that's when we did the drug task force and stuff. And that's when Lou got involved. He was undercover from the time he got out of high school, worked through the DA's office. I think he was involved in 5 or 6 wiretaps as a local police officer, and him and Chief Donovan. And Rob Schwartz. That was when you would come on a 4 to midnight shift and literally do 2 or 3 house breaks a night as people come home because of the drug explosion at that time. People don't remember that, but I mean, that was
Now, who was the fellow with the fire department?
Andrews.
No, this was the dispatcher for the fire department, but he also did the police. That was before you got on board. Merrill Viles.
Merle Viles did that, and also
I believe he would actually give police advice. He was like, what is it? Just a folksy guy.
Last time I
You should
remember-
probably go down and look that thing over.
last time I remember Merle, he fell off the back of the fire truck going out the door. That was when the guys used to ride on the back.
Oh yeah, poor Merrill. But he was a great guy. He
Very good guy.
He ran into a fire one time, and he didn't realize it was a practice fire, and he ended up in the hospital. The poor guy, because they were just faking it, and he didn't know. But what a
Well, they
great,
rang the bell.
what a great guy he was. So, yeah.
Now let me just ask Officer Lou, what was it like growing up in town with your dad in the police department?
Just like the chief said, I think Don McKinnon said it too. Cops kind of come from cop families. I think it's more. I think like when you're a dad, you say you don't want your kid to be a cop
Yeah.
because you just see it's not easy being a cop's kid.
Right.
It's just not an easy thing to do. But I think as you see how cops interact and you see that camaraderie they have, and whether it be at the shooting range. I mean, when we were kids, it was a little different. The guys had their own softball team, and there wasn't all this television and stuff, all the stuff they have. So we used to actually follow the Raynham Police softball team around, and they used to do different tournaments and stuff. We used to go for 4 o'clock in the morning and watch the police hockey team down
The
at
shooting range was in your yard.
Shooting range was in my backyard. So that whole thing, it just always kind of inspired me to be a police officer. But Pat, for this show, for the Good Old Days show, all the guests you have on here, it's just obvious to me that everybody's so invested. I mean,
In the town.
it's awesome.
Yep.
I mean, from you, and then you have Don McKinnon, and you guys talked about Peter King and Chief Pacheco, and now Chief Donovan, and people that actually care about the town.
Right.
And
in a
they're
lot
so
of-
invested in it. I think even from being a kid, you feel that. And,
That
and
doesn't
something you
happen in a lot of towns. Or a lot of towns, the kids can't wait to grow up and get out of town.
They
but-
talk about it
Yeah.
happening in other towns, but it's not,
Right.
they live it here. When you're in Raynham, you just know, you can take, teachers, you just look at different people, they're invested in the town. I tried to follow that lead with the sports and the things that I do with the kids. And now poor Frankie's not even been on a year, and we've already roped him in everything we can rope him into in the town too. So I just think it's awesome. It goes from people before, everybody that's here, and then you guys kind of carried it on, and we just always want Raynham to, whether it's the kids in the town itself, we just want to do our best to be invested in the town.
Now, Chief, you appointed Officer Lou as the school resource officer. I have heard more comments that there are school resource officers and there are school resource officers, but Lou just epitomizes what a school resource
Peter
officer
King
really
appointed
should
him.
be.
Peter King appointed.
Really?
I think one of the problems that young Lou ran into, though, was when the high school became separate in that sense that you had almost two roles to fill. You had the kid in the lower grades, and then suddenly they went to the upper grades. And so you ended up having to cover both, and that's very
Yeah.
difficult to do, but you get the same players as they progressed.
It is, and you got to follow them through. I'm not
Yeah.
going to, like I
No.
said, I'm invested. I consider our Raynham kids my kids,
Yeah.
so they're not going to leave 8th grade
No,
and
and
go
that-
off to a high school and
that's
not
right.
have someone if they need someone there for advice.
And now we have the South School, which will begin, it's in its infancy. So you and Liz Francis are going to
Yes,
do
and,
something down
and
there.
that was that's my fault. That kind of got. I had some health issues I had to deal with first, and we had to put that on hold, and hopefully we'll get rocking.
I told you, Dad, stop giving it to you guys on the 2-yard line, and you guys are going to make it. So say, give it to Pacheco. It's 2-yard line.
His sports program, the speed camp program, that's probably one of the things that I take the most pride in. It's something that the department has done. I mean, they've had up to
You mean the summertime?
the summertime
Yeah,
thing,
that's a
because
great program.
I mean, the thing is, it's done with one volunteer, Jimmy Bro, and one officer on the police department. They sometimes have as many as 125,
Yep.
125 kids with 2 volunteers 3 times a week, doing exercises that no matter what sport you play or whether you're sedentary or very active or in between, you can still use these exercises. They're state-of-the-art exercises made for, whether you play tennis or whether you play baseball, football. And the reason that they can keep that many people there is because people keep coming back to help out. I say one volunteer, one guy that's assigned as a volunteer. But he has college kids, which started, some of them, as 6, 7, 8-year-old kids. Now they're in their 2nd and 3rd year of college, and they're still coming back. They're coming back to give back. They're coming back to get, back in shape for their season, whichever's coming up in college, and to be part of the program. And it's all done through the police for little or no money, which is one of the proudest programs that we were involved in. We've had a lot over 40 years, Mr. McKinnon.
And we've taken that to a new step. Poor Frank is he was a member. He used to be one of the kids running around doing that, getting ready for football. Then he went off to Curry College, came back and helped coach the actual camp, and now he's a police officer in town. He works the midnight day shift. He gets 40 minutes to sleep as long as he doesn't go past 8 o'clock, and then he has to be down at speed camp to volunteer to help out there again. So he helped out all year. So again, it's just the kids love it. It's something they can do all summer. The parents really seem to enjoy it, and we actually get kids from Bridgewater and Raynham and other towns. So
And it's that great connection between the youth and our police department.
Yes, non-aggressive, non-adversarial. And, I still get calls from parents and stuff. Mothers go down there and I'll stop in as many times as I can, and I'll say, why are you guys here? Because it's not really exciting to watch. The kids are all except the days you have the parachutes and stuff, but the wind sails. And they say, because we didn't believe you could deal with 125 kids with 2 people.
Amazing.
And it's absolutely, there's nobody wandering off. Well, you did have one wandered off.
Yeah, we have a couple casualties every once in a while, but we got enough people around to help us out.
It's set up so that they're, from the time they get there, when that whistle blows, they're going through, they're learning how to hydrate, they're learning how to work with others. They're measured, and this is the beauty of it too, is they're measured the times all the time so that they can see their progress, not only through the year, but through the years.
Yeah, and like I said, Frankie's got the unique perspective because we've always had kids come back and give back, but not come back and then become police officers and then give back. So,
Frank, were you down the Cape for a while?
Yes, I was in Oak Bluffs. I was in Martha's Vineyard for 3 years.
Real
after
excitement
college.
down there, right?
Oh, it was great, especially in the
sometimes
winters.
Now, Frank, what was it
Tough
like for
duty
you
with somebody's
growing
gotta
up
be.
Yeah, I know.
in Raynham with your dad involved in the police department?
A lot of the same what Lou said. You know, I mean, everyone's got different backgrounds and everything. But coming from a Pacheco background, like your father's, the deputy chief or captain, deputy chief growing up, and your brother's the dare officer when I was in school. So it was unique that everyone knew that, especially around my age, that my family was in police. So it was different. And my father always told me he wanted me to be a veterinarian. He didn't want me to be a police officer. And that didn't work out well for him.
kind of like my baseball
I was
career.
looking for damn fastball.
I thought it was the curve.
It was the curve. It was the curve. Yeah.
The curve
What
was
about
up.
in your own mind? Did you always want to be a police officer?
You pretty much, yeah. As long as I can remember now, I've always wanted to be a police officer. So I mean, it's just all I saw growing up, and a lot of what I knew. So I mean, NFL didn't work out. So I mean,
Yeah, right. And it's worked out well for you so far.
yes, absolutely. I love it. And I'm glad to be home. I've been home for over a year now, back in Raynham as a police officer. I wouldn't rather be anywhere else. So.
Excellent, very good. Speak about being invested in the community. Lou, you've also gotten involved in a couple of other roles besides police department. Raynham is chairman of the Raynham Historical Commission, RACAM, our Raynham Cable Community Access, whatever all of that title is, and school committee even.
Yes, I was.
You still
I'm not
are.
quite sure how I got back on the school committee. I think I won't.
I think you were drafted.
How do you
one of
spell
those
Pacheco?
elections.
That was the question going into the polls.
It was one of those elections where you went to bed and you weren't something, and you woke up and you were.
You see that? You weren't even a candidate, but
So
people
We did the
just came
same
out
thing
of the
for
woodwork.
Sutter with managing his campaign.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. Well,
not quite the same. But the school committee, once again, it's the money that you spend on the kids while they're in school, and the programs that you can get to those kids, it's just so much easier than dealing with them at the police level afterwards. So if there's anything that you can do at that level before they're involved in the system, before they've gone down, sometimes you can't. But I will say this, of all the juvenile offenders, in other words, criminal offenders, that I dealt with since we've had a DARE officer, and that's McKinnon / Marie Smith story there. They were the ones that did
Supported
that. But
that.
since that time, every juvenile offender that we've had from Raynham, we've had a full knowledge of, and were able to try to help before they became that. And of course, you can never measure a negative. You can't measure how many people didn't. But with the anti-drug programs, with the speed camp programs, and with the just interacting, as you say, with the police officers, giving them another route. He acts as a clearinghouse for different other agencies. I know this agency does mental health work. I know this agency does something for kids that are hurting themselves or cutting themselves. And taking those kids and helping them, getting them help before they get into the criminal justice system is huge, huge.
there's something to be said for, like in my career, I'm still trying to talk my daughter Laura into coming in sometime. McKinnons have taught in Massachusetts since about 1920, straight on up, between my uncles, my cousins, and my daughter is down at the Martin, and I taught at Taunton High. And it's so important, as it is in police work, to have continuity, that you follow up. Like these guys here have forgotten more than the average person knows just through growing up with this, just listening to their father and at the table and all, you know. They've got a new show on, Blue Badge or something like that on, and they're at a table and they discuss, and you can almost picture this happening in the Pacheco family.
The Blue Bloods. It's one of my
Blue
favorite
Bloods
shows.
on Monday night at 10 o'clock, I
The
think.
police commissioner and his two sons that are, one's a detective and one's a officer. Yeah, they modeled it on the Pachecos
The
from
Boston
Raynham.
kid was one of them. I don't know. He wasn't the one
Yes.
who went to jail, though.
No,
And then we have our extended family with Billy Donnelly and Chief Donovan, and you know they were all part of the group too. So.
Yeah. So it's something to watch. That's part of it, which other, as you've said, Pat, other communities don't have that connection in the community, so that we know the community all the way going up. That's why the history of the community is so important, so we get the family coming in who knows what's going on around. I mean, you know, Joe Betancourt had the greatest line of, except for the we's and the they's, which is another story, but they said to him, they're going to, you're doing so well, we think we'd like to hire you, and he said, you can't afford me. and that's what the Pacheco family is. You can't afford to buy a juvenile officer like this because, you know, it just isn't going to happen for you, because if somebody comes in, this is why I am concerned about some of the other positions as they fill them. And not to get into it, but there are problems when people come in and they don't understand the town of Raynham. But these guys here could write the book on it.
Lou, probably one of the biggest cases, certainly in your career, was the Mary Lou Arruda kidnapping case. And Don, you were a selectman at that time, and I think that's another case that really brought the town of Raynham together, because you had a complete community support for what the police were doing, and everybody just pulled together.
Started right off with the way Dave Bonaparte, who's a cousin of ours, started the case. You know, he was just his instincts were good. Now this was going right back to what Dawn was saying, because
We knew the family.
we knew the family. Plus,
So,
he was
so
part
we
of
knew
the
when that
police
girl
family.
was missing. Usually there's a time period. You say, well, maybe she ran away, maybe she... No.
Exactly.
No, not Mary Lou.
So what did we do? That
kidnapped.
caused us to shut the road down, shut the
Yep.
scene down,
Yep.
which the critical evidence was a tire print on a dirt road at the time.
And the photography,
From
I
a
think
kid
it was...
that was in Bones,
Ellis, I
hadn't
think,
even
took the
been to
picture.
the academy yet.
Did Bruce Ellis take the picture or something?
Bruce Ellis took the picture. Yes,
Picture?
he did.
Yes.
And
It was
and he forgot to put a ruler in the picture, but he had his boot in the picture.
Yeah.
So we ended up confiscating his boot and using that as the ruler. So when you saw that cop walking around with
innovative.
one shoe,
And you had the first, in Raynham, the first animal that actually was testifying in a fashion on whether there was a boat being used to
Yeah,
ship,
that's
a
right.
boat, I say a boat, to the Taunton River.
Whether it
The
went to the
question was,
Taunton River.
yeah, and it was an animal that perused the area.
yeah, we had the canine was used extensively because it was a circumstantial case.
And you were a canine officer at the
And
time.
that's why I was called. And I was a sergeant at the time. And the dog proved that, because they were saying, well, how do you know somebody didn't come out of the woods and get her? So that was up to the dog and the dog's record and the dog's training and so on, and our testimony of that somebody didn't come from the woods or out of the, from the
And
river.
that was a case where, when you talk about war, you never hear about budget in a sense that
Yes.
you're going to, and that, there was never a budget situation on
Through
Mary Lou
4
Arruda.
trials, and you had the complete...
There were 3, was there 4? No, it was
4.
There was 4,
4 trials.
and there was never a question of will we go, yes, we're just going on because we know we got him,
Oh, it was
and we know he isn't going to
incredible.
walk.
It was incredible. The
And he
fourth
almost
one-
did. In one of those trials, he was one person away.
The fourth one, and
That
of
person
course the
deserves
mother
a
was,
dinner.
of course you covered it as a newspaper reporter at the time.
That's right.
And the mother was very instrumental in making sure that these witnesses showed up.
Yeah.
Mr. McKinnon and the selectmen were instrumental in making sure that there wasn't a budget issue for Peter King. We could keep people in the courthouse constantly during the trial. Because remember, each trial lasts months, those trials. It wasn't a 3-day trial.
no.
You could only try it 2 times a year, either in January or in September, because they're getting into the June or the Christmas. Because as you remember, you were there, the hung jury was on Christmas Eve.
Right.
And there was
And
one person holding
We
up.
started in September.
Yeah, there was one person holding up.
But
the
we
thing,
kept
yeah.
people in there, Sergeant Jordan, Sergeant Bonaparte, myself, we kept people there, shuttling witnesses back and forth. We were victim witness, but you're right, it was handled as a
And there was a time
as a
when you were
town.
supposed to wait a certain period of time, and Peter King called me up. I was chair at the time, I guess, and he said, we usually would have to wait.
24 hours.
Yeah, and he's giving me this story about why we should do it right away. And I said, Peter, you're doing it right away anyway, aren't you? And he said, yes, yes, we are. So, I mean, you know, thank you for calling, but we...
Exactly. And then again, that community connectedness.
Yeah.
As a result of that, Chief King recommended that our RAVE organization start our fingerprinting program, so he worked closely with the volunteer group in the schools. Chief Lou, you were the first police officer to actually serve on our board of directors. We work closely with Officer Lou, so there's that community connectedness you find everywhere you look in Raynham.
And Chief Donovan now uses that for training, right? In that case, he uses it every year. He uses that anniversary to make everybody aware of missing kids and so on and so
That's a
forth.
good idea.
Because that, it does two or three different things, but because that keeps it fresh in people's minds, and it makes these officers know that how critical that first period is.
And using almost the entire department, whereas in some other communities you would have had one or two people and it's their turf and don't get in my way, but everybody was involved in that trial.
Well, that was a big thing. See, we had 50 special police officers because of the dog track, which no other department had that. You know, while we had a small police department, we had 50 other police officers. So we had, as specials, we had parole officers, we had probation officers, we had insurance investigators, we had, we actually had an expert on tires that worked for the police department. So that expanded police department gave us a lot of capabilities that no other police department.
I think you went up to Brockton. I remember you were telling me at the time he was working in that donut shop off of Route 27.
That's right.
And you took the witness from shop to shop to shop.
That's right.
And out he came.
That's right. And he identified the witness. The witness didn't identify him.
Isn't that something?
By his reaction.
Yeah.
You knew
So
he
he'd come out the back and
he was
he
happy.
saw the
he
witness.
was
and
the
he'd
day
seen it.
manager, and life is good.
Imagine doing that today. Yeah, that would have been bad.
But it worked.
It worked. They got it in. It was never appealed.
You had the composite.
Was that
drawing
Don
of him.
hypnosis?
He cut the hair to try to get away.
Yeah,
He changed the hairstyle and he did everything he could. Terrible man.
I think we have, believe it or not, just about a minute left.
Wow.
Officer Lou, just give us a quick little update on what's planned for the teen center at South School.
We
former
are
South School.
literally just on a holding pattern right now. I got to talk to Liz Francis. I've been out of work for a little bit, so once I come back, I'll jump in with both feet again, and we'll get that going. Promise. I think it's a great idea. I love the whole concept of it. Again, it's just a more outreach for kids and cops to kind of bump into each other a little bit more, just like they do here at the school. So I will keep everybody posted.
And in a matter of time, that can come, instead of one floor, eventually when the tenants move out, that can become a full building.
that'd be great.
And that's, you got an unused piece of property is dangerous. It's not only not good, it's dangerous. And that piece of property sitting down there now with Lou and Liz working at us.
Yeah, and if we can get, we said it, people being invested. If we can get the kids invested in that place, the kids will take care of their own, so they'll take care of that building themselves. And we won't have to worry about vandalism and things like that. So that'll kind of be
Right,
nice.
and
Well,
help the
it's
neighborhood.
On our many online against crime shows, Officer Chief Pacheco, as you many times mentioned, that those after-school hours are a critical time to keep kids occupied.
They call it latchkey hours. It's critical is right. And one other thing I have to mention too is I do have a stepdaughter that's a police officer also, Stephanie, but she's working today. So
She's
Okay, so
special.
We wouldn't have room for her, but that's okay. We'd need a bigger set.
But thank the family, appreciate you coming in. This is the beginning of All in the Family. We'll try to get Janus on with his.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, welcome on board.
they usually don't welcome all three of us. One of us is usually there in official capacity.
Have Very good. Well,
Thank you
I think
very
we
much.
are just about out of time. We're getting the sign. Frank, thank you for joining
you.
us. Chief Lou, welcome back. And Officer Lou, we'll see you again with an update on our teen center.
Yep, next time you
For
see me,
sure.
I'll be nice and shaved, and I'll look like myself
Alright,
again. so.
Okay. And Dawn, we'll be back on our next Good Old Days.
That's what we do, Pat.
All right,
because
thank you
that's
very
what
much.
do.
We want to thank all of you for being with us as well. We'll see you on our next episode.
See,
went
we
over
want
time.
the